Welcome back. You're still on Idea Morning Digest on Idea Television. Now we move to what's trending, looking at a major story that has been making waves across social media platforms. And today our story is on Ghana opening up diplomatic talks with South Africa over viral xenophobic attack. Ghana has opened urgent diplomatic talks with South Africa following viral videos that appear to show xenophobic attacks on Ghanaian nationals. The development prompted swift engagement between both countries. The Minister for Foreign Affairs, Samuel Okudzo Ablakwa, confirmed that he spoke with his South African counterpart, Ronald Lamola, to address the situation and coordinate a response after the footage sparked concern. Ghana's intervention comes as authorities in Pretoria also moved to engage African diplomatic missions to provide clarity and reassure affected countries amid rising tension. In a statement, Lakwa said his outreach was prompted by disturbing scenes circulating online. He noted that the South African government responded with concern, adding that Lamola expressed empathy with the victims and pledged full-scale investigations into the incidents captured in the footage. Officials in South Africa are expected to brief African ambassadors as part of efforts to manage the situation and prevent escalation. Meanwhile, Ghana's High Commission in South Africa stepped up efforts to identify and support affected nationals, working with the Foreign Affairs Ministry in Accra. Ablakwa said he has been in constant contact with Ghana's High Commission to South Africa, Benjamin Kwashe, to coordinate the response. Well, let's take a look at the first video this morning of South African citizens, black citizens, also attacking other African nationals within their country. Let's
Oh, Natuna Bapemu Shawaye.
the present video of Black African being, I'm trying to find the right word right now, but being harassed and also assaulted by a group of young South African men who have different opinions about why the African is in their country. But let's look at the next video of the Kenyan president who has also raised his concerns and also spoken about the rising attacks against Africans in South Africa.
Of South Africa do not know what happened before they gained their freedom. The whole of this continent stood behind South Africa. The whole of Africa stood behind South Africa to fight against apartheid. I remember all of us growing up as secondary school children, went on marches. We were part of the African Youth Command. We demonstrated, we boycotted classes and all that, all in the fight against apartheid. Indeed, for several of the countries where their citizens have been brutalized in South Africa, these are countries that were called frontline states that harbored the freedom fighters of South Africa and gave them safe haven, gave them passports, to be able to avoid the clutches of the apartheid regime. Nigeria, even though not a neighbor of South Africa, was considered a frontline state because of the economic contribution that Nigeria did to the ANC to be able to liberate South Africa from apartheid. And so,
well, interesting development right there. We've seen that this issue is sparking diplomatic engagement between various African countries who do have nationals in South Africa. And over the years, this xenophobic attacks has been recurring, where many Africans, including Nigerians, have been a subject of the attack by some South Africans who believe that African countries, citizens from other African countries are coming into their own country to take advantage of their social amenities or social whatever it is that they benefit from the government, they understand that they believe that some other African countries are taking over some of those little things that they benefit from their own country. There was another video I saw that we won't be playing, but of a particular group of South African men also going into a hospital and demanding that all of the non South African citizens in that facility leave immediately while they're being treated by some doctors or waiting to see a consultant. But this just shows how South Africans have derailed from the history or from the trajectory of one unity of Africa. South Africa has been a country that benefited immensely from most African countries, Nigeria inclusive, Ghana, some other African countries. Nigeria is one of the frontline states, despite not being geographically close to South Africa, but we invest heavily in South Africa's liberation away from the apartheid regime that discriminates against black people, that imprisoned black people, that disenfranchised black people, that made life difficult for black people during the apartheid era. Nigeria was one of those countries, and other African countries as well. They labored, they clamored, both international organization. They spent their money, they put their diplomatic weight to Africa. There were times where the freedom fighter Nelson Mandela stayed in Nigeria. Some other South African opposition leaders at the time stayed in different African countries, and they were given asylum so that they would be prevented from being persecuted. But we see that this is what other black African countries are using to pay back for Africans now in their own country. And I think the deep problem here is the economic situation within the South African system, and also the disparity in their own economy. The whites still and retain most of the economic power within that system. So the people that are supposed to tailor their anger towards, they're not tailoring it towards them, and they're tailoring it back to other African countries that are there, perhaps legitimately as well, to conduct their own businesses, to leave, because there's a freedom of migration around the world. You can move to other countries as long as you're doing it legally. So they are leaving all of these issues that they should take up with their own governments, with the system that has put them in a position of a disadvantage. They are not taking up that responsibility to ensure that they are looking for ways to solve their own challenges. What are the privileges that are being accorded to white people that are not accorded to black people? Or what are the opportunities that are there for white people? What are those land that are still in the hands of white people in their country? They are not looking at all of that, but they are subjecting other African citizens like them, black people like them. They are beating them up, as we seen the picture of the video of the man being beaten up by a gang. I call them a gang, hoodlums. We must call them, being beating up this man for whatever reason that they may have found him wanted. So this is actually the case that we're fighting for, and we see how Ghana has been able to speak up. And that's what we're expecting the Nigerian government to do as well. When you have your citizens being killed, you remember there was a man who was killed. There was a man who was a Nigerian student who also was using his vehicle to do transportation, Uber in South Africa, who was killed by some black South Africans. So you see many of these attacks against black Africans within South Africa, and you wonder what exactly is the hatred for? Why are these people aggrieved? Why are they taking out injustice against black people, like fellow black people, people that sacrificed for the emancipation that they are experiencing right now, people that sacrificed for their own freedoms. There would be no freedom for black South Africans today without the suffering, without the provision, and without the backing of all other African countries that ensure that there is equality between the white South Africans and the black South Africans. But we see that when history go for a long time, many of these people have forgotten the history. Many of these people are children. Many of them weren't even born at the time when the freedom fight, when most African countries were fighting for their freedom. As we see that they've forgotten, perhaps history is no longer taught in their own country, and their government as well must rise up to the occasion. This has happened one too many times. And the government of South Africa will say we are following it. All of these people should be arrested. Perhaps they should be in a place where they are being rehabilitated right now. Yeah, they should be in a place where they are being rehabilitated, where they need to understand that they need to be in prison or put in a place where re-educated as well, so that they can play videos of when white people were dealing with them the way they are dealing with other black Africans right now. Their ancestors or their grandfathers or great grandfathers experienced more in the hands of white South Africans. There was segregation. There were places they couldn't go into. So you couldn't do all of that. And I saw another video of this, perhaps one of the gang leaders here. I saw him speaking to another white South African, and he was very gentle. He was very cordial. He was speaking with him in language that wasn't even confrontational. But when you want to speak to another African countries, you engage with them with blows, you engage with them with harassment and with assault. This has to end. And this shows that African countries, the African Union, are not doing their job. Other African countries, perhaps when they begin to sanction South Africa, when they sanction them and lock them away from the African Union, when they ensure that there's diplomatic engagement that would punish them, they would rise up to the occasion and ensure that African countries and citizens in South Africa must be protected, because this is becoming too worrisome.
It's becoming very, very worrisome. Now, to stop this attack, like the recent incident involving Ghanaians in South Africa, both governments are actually, both government needs to come together to take a step forward to know how to put a stop to this, because it's becoming very disturbing and alarming at the same time. Now, other Ghanaians will not be so confident to walk into African countries because they are avoiding this or that. Same reason why you're there, same reasons why these people go there for greener pastures, to look for one or two to help themselves and their family. Now, I think one of the way forward is for the government to enhance policing, that's deploy law enforcement to hotspots where immigrants are being attacked, are being vulnerable. That's one way forward to actually put a stop to this attack. And also a rapid response unit. We need a rapid response unit where they can call and response will come immediately to help the situation, and it will not lead to somebody dying, because I've heard a lot of people have died through the process because of this numerous attack, and it's not making good headlines at all in the media. And I think it's time for government to take a stand on this. Like you said, most of these people do not know the history and how it came out and how all this fighting came about, and I don't think most of them are even going through history in their school right now about all these things. So we're saying this attack, these people being bullied, these people being maltreated, it's heartbreaking. This is somebody's son over there. This can be somebody's father in the future. These are youths. Of course, they are youths, and we don't expect this. Why the hate? Why the hate? I mean, this is your fellow skin color for to talk about this. Why the hate? Why can't we walk in love, unity, and peace? And one way I think that this can actually come to an end is by having safe reporting channels. They should establish hotlines and community offices where migrants can safely report threats. I think by establishing that, it can help in a massive way where these people can be reported and justice will be brought.
I don't think they're even very well, but I'm very annoyed right now.
Yeah.
And I don't think they actually need any reporting. These videos are there on social media.
Okay, they would say they should do the formal.
Yeah, they should do the
formal process.
Formally report and do the process. But the government as well should rise up to the occasion.
Of course, they are saying this.
You're looking at these videos online. You're saying it online. They're videoing themselves. Okay. That means they feel emboldened by that action.
Exactly,
and that's why it's very important that the government must rise up to the occasion. Now you mentioned that. These people are actually the same color as theirs, and that's when they say that love knows no bound. Hatred as well knows no bound.
That's true.
It doesn't recognize your color. It doesn't recognize your ethnicity. It doesn't recognize religious affiliation or even cultural affiliation as well.
Exactly.
That's why it's very important that history. They must understand history. Yes, because many Africans
they must understand history.
The history of slavery in the world. Where people are talking about how white people enslaved most Africans, and the entire gruesome history that we went through, and we are trying to ensure that we forge a future that do not make us experience the pain of the past again. But this is the pain of the past being meted against Africans like theirs. So if you have your citizens that are not educated, citizens that are not well informed, citizens that have no
this is what you get at the end of the day.
This is what you get
at the end of the day.
And we must, African countries, other African countries must rise up to the occasion to ensure that they hold South Africa accountable
Accountable.
You cannot continue to say you're having diplomatic conversation.
Of course.
You cannot repatriate everybody away from South Africa. You cannot ensure that you would go there by themselves and you enforce the law there. South Africa has its own jurisdiction with its own territory. That is why it must be held accountable. The government must be held accountable. African Union must do something. Other ECOWAS must do something. Other African blocs must do something. Perhaps it's trade sanctions. Perhaps it's other avenue. We must, first of all, I must emphasize it, that we must exhaust all diplomatic means. And I think that's what Ghana is doing. Nigeria must do that. But when we've exhausted all diplomatic means, then sanctions must follow to ensure that when the governments are being punished, then they would do the needful to rein in their own citizens that are doing it. And we're not saying that South Africans are not feeling whatever economic policies, but whatever issue you have, you don't go around beating people, you don't go around killing people. There are videos that I've watched, seeing people jump up from high-rise building just so that they can escape. They jump down, they die. They jump down, they wound.
These are making people very uncomfortable in the environment.
You're not experiencing this. South Africans are not experiencing this when they go to other countries.
Other countries, that's the problem.
Countries. So why
they are well accepted and well welcome.
Yeah. It's very depressing, and I just hope that other African countries would rise up to the occasion and ensure that perhaps to exhaust all diplomatic means to ensure that this problem is quelled. And should all diplomatic means be exhausted, sanctions should be meted against the government of South Africa so that they can do the needful and rein in their citizens.
And also the perpetrators.
And also the perpetrators. Whoever is involved in this should be
brought to
justice.
Yeah.
Well, that's as much as we can take this morning on Idea Morning Digest. We've seen start of the conversation from across the headline down to the discussion segments, and finally we are ending the what's trending with the weather report so that you can know exactly what to expect for the day. But thank you for being a part of this program today. I am Adewale Olashopo, and I've been in the studio with Mary Ojumajo. I like to pronounce your name.
Nice.
That's all we have from all of us here at Idea Television this morning. Stay with us. We still have more updates for you. Bye for now.
Bye.